إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات ربي وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Ali Imran, in 4 ayahs out of Surah Ali Imran, the 133rd ayah through the 136th ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ عَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ أُعِدَّتْ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Race each other towards forgiveness from your Lord, and a garden as spacious as the heavens and earth, reserved for the pious. الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ فِي السَّرَّاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Those who give in both prosperity and adversity, restrain their anger, and pardon others. God loves those who do good. وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً أَوْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ ذَكَرُوا اللَّهَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا لِذُنُوبِهِمْ وَمَنْ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَلَمْ يُصِرُّوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلُوا وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. And those who, if they do something shameful or wrong themselves, honor God and ask forgiveness for their sins. And who forgives sins but God? And they don't knowingly persist in what they've done. أُولَٰئِكَ جَزَاؤُهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ مِّن رَبِّهِمْ وَجَنَّاتٌ تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا وَنِعْمَ أَجْرُ الْعَامِلِينَ. Those people, their reward is forgiveness from their Lord, and gardens through which rivers flow, to remain there forever. What excellent wages. We people are obsessed with competing with each other, and we're constantly comparing ourselves with each other and thinking about how we measure up. Who's the richest? Who's the strongest? Who's the prettiest? Who's the most popular? Who has more friends? Who went to the best school? Who has the best grades? Who has the biggest house, the nicest car, and so on. Members of different religions compete against each other. Countries compete against each other. Different races compete against each other. Different families and tribes compete against each other. And even members of the same family compete against each other. As individuals or in groups, we're always competing with each other. And no one knows us better than the one who made us, subhanahu wa ta'ala, who said about us, أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ حَتَّى زُرْتُمُ الْمَقَابِرِ. Striving to have more than each other occupies you until you visit the graves. Since we have this instinct, this desire to compete, we should realize that we can't compete at everything. We have to pick a goal. We can't be the best at everything, because competing in some field, it requires devotion, and it requires time and effort. And we only have a limited amount. So a wise person is a person who picks the best goal, the most important goal, the most noble goal, and devotes his time and effort and energy to reaching that goal. And there's nothing greater than the goal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directed us to race towards or to compete with each other for. In these ayahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. And race each other towards forgiveness from your Lord. Forgiveness. This is the greatest goal there is. Salvation, forgiveness, redemption in the hereafter. If we don't achieve this, nothing else matters. No other achievements that we make matter if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't forgive our sins, if He doesn't pardon us, if He doesn't blot out our mistakes and our errors. Any other goals we achieve in this life will be of no use to us if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have compassion on us and forgive us. And the second part of the goal in these ayahs is something bigger, something greater, something extra, something bigger than anybody actually deserves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَجَنَّةٍ عَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ. A garden that is as spacious as the heavens and the earth. This is the ultimate goal. Eternal bliss, everlasting life in the hereafter, in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His gardens of paradise. And as the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, وَلَقَابُ قَوْسِ أَحَدِكُمْ أَوْ مَوْضِعُ يَدِهِ فِي الْجَنَّةِ خَيْرٌ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَمَا فِيهَا. What this basically means is the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, a handspan in Jannah is better than this entire world and everything in it. And notice how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described paradise in this ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَجَنَّةٍ عَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ. A garden as spacious as the heavens and earth. And most of the things that we compete over, there's a winner and there's a loser. There's only limited space. If I'm competing for a particular job, for me to get that job, someone else has to lose it. If I want a particular goal, usually other people have to be deprived of this. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His reward in the hereafter is unlimited. His bounty is unlimited. And while usually when I compete for something in this life, I have to push other people away, this goal, the more I share it with others, the bigger a share I have in this prize. Then, in these ayahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us how we can compete, the areas in which we should compete to achieve this goal. First of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that this prize, this goal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَعِدَّتْ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. It's reserved, it's prepared, it's waiting for the people who are pious, the people who have taqwa, the people who honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the people who are dutiful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the people who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not the people who are the most wealthy or the most popular or the strongest or the most famous, those who have piety. There are many aspects of piety, many signs of taqwa, but in these ayahs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directed our attention to 4 areas in particular that we can compete with each other in. 4 areas in particular. The first one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ فِي السَّرَّاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ. Those who give throughout prosperity and adversity. The biggest thing that people compete with in this life is money. Who has the most money? What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directed us to compete in is who can give away their money. People in this life obsess about money and they guard money with their lives. But these people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described in this life, they actually give that away. It's as if they're willing to part with it. They're willing to have less money because they have a bigger concern. They have something that they value more than that money. And these people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described here, they're constantly giving whatever they can. No matter if they're rich or if they're poor. If they're going through good times, they give. Even when they're going through hard times and things are tight, they still give. Compare this with something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the same surah. A few ayahs before these, in the 130th ayah of this surah, right before these ayahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَأْكُلُوا الرِّبَا أَضْعَافًا مُضَاعَفًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, O you who believe, don't consume usury, multiplied, compounded many times over. It's as if this trait here is the opposite of that one. Someone who consumes usury, they have money, and their goal is to get even more money. They already have capital, and they want to make that grow. Usually by taking money, taking advantage of someone who needs money. These people are just the opposite. They have a bigger goal than growing their wealth. Even when they don't have money, even when they have a little bit of money, they give that away. They're willing to have even less because they value Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being close to Him more than they value that money. The second trait Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to compete over is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ. Those who restrain their anger. Competitions are usually based on aggression. And the most aggressive person is the one who wins. You want to make your opponent afraid. If you try to compete with me, if you try to challenge me, you'll pay a price or you're going to get hurt. But the winners in this competition are just the opposite of that. They're the ones who are the least aggressive. When someone provokes them or wrongs them, they don't lash out. They don't repay him they don't do the same thing that he did to them. No matter how angry they feel inside, they don't try to harm the other person with their words or their actions. They're like the better of the two sons of Adam. When his brother said he was going to try to kill him, he said, لَإِنْ بَسَطْتَ إِلَيَّ يَدَكَ لِتَقْتُلَنِي مَا أَنَا بِبَاسِطٍ يَدِيَ إِلَيْكَ لِأَقْتُلَكَ. Even if you reach out and try to kill me, I still won't reach out and try to kill you. And he said, why? إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهَ رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Because I fear Allah. And this, being able to control yourself, even if you get angry, even if you think someone wronged you or offended you, this is the test of true strength. As the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith in both Bukhari and Muslim, narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ said, لَيْسَ الشَّدِيدُ بِالسُّرْعَةِ إِنَّمَا الشَّدِيدُ الَّذِي يَمْلِكُ نَفْسَهُ عِنْدَ الْغَضَبِ. The Prophet ﷺ said what means strength isn't being able to throw everyone else to the ground. Strength is being able to control yourself when you're angry. The third trait that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in these ayahs is وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. Those who pardon other people. These people, they control their anger, and then they also forget. They overlook when people make mistakes towards them. In most competitions, you try to keep score, and you try to count all of your opponent's mistakes and magnify them, and you hide your own mistakes. In this ayah, it's just the opposite. When other people make mistakes, these people, these pious people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described here, they overlook those mistakes. They forget the mistakes of others. They disregard them. They ignore them. They don't keep track of other people's mistakes. And if we wonder why would someone let someone else get away with doing some injustice to him or disrespecting him or wronging him or making some mistake? Why would anybody let someone else get away with that? The answer is at the end of this ayah. These people have in mind something that's far greater than the petty differences with other people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah loves those who do good, forgiving others, and not acting aggressively towards others, not harming to others. That's acting good. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who act good. So even if you think someone got away with offending you or harming you, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you, it doesn't matter what other people think of you. It doesn't matter if you think your status has been diminished in this life, if the King of Kings subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you. The fourth trait Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in this ayah is وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً أَوْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ ذَكَرُوا اللَّهَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا لِذُنُوبِهِمْ وَمَنْ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَلَمْ يُصِرُّوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلُوا وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. And those who, if they do something shameful or wrong themselves, honor God and ask forgiveness for their sins. And who forgives sins but God? And they don't knowingly persist in what they've done. As we mentioned, usually in a competition, you try to keep track of your opponent's mistakes and hide your own mistakes. You magnify your opponent's mistakes and you ignore your own mistakes. In these ayahs, we see just the opposite. These people, they pardon others. They don't focus on the mistakes of others. They're lenient with others. But with themselves, they're strict. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً أَوْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. If they do something shameful, or if they wrong themselves, they make a mistake, what do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ذَكَرُوا اللَّهِ. They honor Allah. When they make a mistake, their first concern is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not concerned about what will I look like if I admit that I make a mistake, or they're not worried about this person. Why did this person tell me I'm doing? Who is he to tell me that I'm doing something wrong? He makes even more mistakes. The first thing that they think about is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not about the other person, or not about their reputation. They honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They realize if they make a mistake, their first concern is their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how do they react to that? فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا لِذُنُوبِهِمْ. They ask forgiveness for their sins. But they don't ask other people to forgive their sins. They ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive their sins. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَنْ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. And who forgives sins but God? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more forgiving than people are. Many people, if they catch you making one mistake, your reputation is ruined forever. And they'll never forget about that one mistake. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His forgiveness and His compassion are limitless. They're greater than all the sins we could ever commit. No matter how great our sin is, no matter how many mistakes we make, as long as we keep turning back to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, as long as we keep asking His forgiveness and we never give up on Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will forgive us. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives us, it doesn't matter what other people think of us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَمْ يُصِرُّوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلُوا وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. They're not persistent. They don't continue to do something that they know is wrong after they realize that it's a mistake. بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعني وإياكم بما فيه من الآيات والذكر الحكيم. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم الجليل لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. In these ayahs, after describing these traits of piety that these people possess and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to compete with each other in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again reminded us of this goal, this ultimate prize, the prize that we should compete for. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أُولَٰئِكَ جَزَاؤُهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ مِّن رَبِّهِمْ وَجَنَّاتٌ تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا وَنِعْمَ أَجْرُ الْعَامِلِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, those people, their reward is forgiveness from their Lord and gardens through which rivers flow, to remain there forever. What excellent wages. This truly is the ultimate goal. And these are the most excellent wages because this reward is bigger than anybody deserves just by the virtue of their actions. This is bounty and grace and a favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salvation in the hereafter and eternal bliss, this is the biggest goal. There's nothing bigger than this. And if we keep this in mind, all of the things that we compete about and worry about in this life seem silly and petty. Remember that the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith in Sahih Muslim, narrated by Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ said, يُؤْتَى بِأَنْعَمِ أَهْلِ الدُّنْيَا مِنْ أَهْلِ النَّارِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَيُصْبَغُ فِي النَّارِ صَبْغَةً ثُمَّ يُقَالْ يَا ابْنَ آدَمَ هَلْ رَأَيْتَ خَيْرًا قَطْ هَلْ مَرَّ بِكَ نَعِيمٌ قَطْ فَيَقُولُ لَا وَاللَّهِ. The Prophet ﷺ said, on the day of resurrection, the most well-to-do person, the richest person in this life, who is destined for the hellfire, will be taken and dipped once into the fire. Then he will be asked, son of Adam, has anything good ever happened to you? Have you ever been happy? And he will reply, no, I swear. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, وَيُؤْتَى بِأَشَدِّ النَّاسِ بُؤْسًا فِي الدُّنْيَا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ فيصبغ صبغة في الجنة فيقال له يا ابن آدم هل رأيت بؤسا قط هل مر بك شدة قط فيقول لا والله يا رب ما مر بي بؤس قط ولا رأيت شدة قط. The Prophet ﷺ said, then the poorest person in this life, the person who had the most difficult life in this world, who is destined for paradise, will be taken and dipped once into paradise. Then he will be asked, son of Adam, has anything bad ever happened to you? have you ever experienced any hardship? And he will reply, no, I swear, my Lord, nothing bad has ever happened to me, and I've never experienced any hardship. Remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ وَإِنَّمَا تُوَفَّوْنَ أُجُورَكُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Every soul will taste death, and you will be paid in full only on the day of resurrection. فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. Whoever is spared from the fire and admitted to paradise will have truly won. وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. And the life of this world is only a temporary illusion. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us salvation, forgiveness, and His paradise in the hereafter. And grant us the guidance to adhere to these traits that He described in these ayahs. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت وباركت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. ربنا آمنا فاغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت خير الراحمين. اللهم إنا نسألك من الخير كله عاجله وآجله ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم، ونعوذ بك من الشر كله عاجله وآجله ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم. اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك عبدك ونبيك، ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذ منه عبدك ونبيك. اللهم إنا نسألك الجنة وما قرب إليها من قول أو عمل، ونعوذ بك من النار وما قرب إليها من قول أو عمل، ونسألك أن تجعل كل قضاء قضيته لنا خيرا. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.